Hello, and welcome to episode one of From Moon to Moon. Last time we sort of did a little intro where we were practicing and, sort of working the kinks uh, out of our equipment and out of the software. So we figured out what we're doing. If you want to go listen to that episode, it's not good quality. There's background noise and background music that was not intended to be there, but we had a lot of fun making it, so please go listen to it if you're so inclined to do so. For this episode, we will be talking about creativity, the creative spirit, and how the creative spirit sort of ties into this time of year with the spring equinox and Aries energy and tapping into Aries energy to use in your creative practice and that sort of thing. And we hope you enjoy and learn a little bit. So here it is. Okay, so Heather, before we get into our topic today, we're going to talk about what we have been witching on lately. So, Heather, what have you been witching lately?
Well, I've been I've been collecting stones over the past couple months, but I really haven't done anything with them. Lately I've just been gathering them going, "Oh yeah, I'll use these for something one day."
That one day has
And
come.
it's like crystals. Yeah, and it's like crystals and gemstones and things like that. And over the past like week, I've started like really paying attention to them. And it started one day where I was feeling really anxious. And I grabbed one of the crystals and I put it in my pocket. And I just took it with me. And then I realized at the end of the day that almost immediately after I put it in my pocket, like the rest of the day was just wonderful. The anxiety was gone, like everything was good, you know, and I never thought about it again. And so I kept doing that, and so I've been carrying them with me lately, and I'll go, okay, today I want this. Today I want to have a little bit better luck. I just want things to like go smoothly. That's what I would call luck in my case. I'm not dropping stuff and, being clumsy or whatever. That's good luck for me. And so I went and I'm like, okay, what stones are lucky? So like one by one I've gone through these like intentions and then like learned that this stone does that. And so I've been learning about all these things now, and it's just like it's snowballing. Now I'm just like, oh, I need more stones. And I think I've kind of been doing that with herbs a little bit more, but I'm waiting to get some like newer, fresher herbs because like I feel so compelled to just start mixing up crazy incenses for like weird specific purposes and stuff, and going like, well, this one's for when this happens and you feel sad, you know, things like that's not very that's not a very good example, but
No, I think it's perfect. The past couple of months, I haven't really been doing that much like specific intentions and creating, like manifesting things or anything like that. I've just been.
mine's mostly been like mood changing is all it really has. It's all been like just making sure that I stay like balanced and like just good throughout the day and like riding that little cloud, you know. But go on.
Yeah, okay. hmm I think most of my magical stuff, all of my sort of spiritual
Hmm.
witchy stuff that I've been doing, is just making sure that I take the time to recognize that
Hmm.
there are good things happening in my life at all times. And really to me it's about gratitude right now. I'm just trying to, make sure that I recognize all of the blessings that I have basically. And I really feel like that is like one of the very first steps to, you know, being a successful witch, and which I'm sure you can be a successful witch without doing that, but I feel such a shift in the way that I'm thinking and the way that I'm doing things whenever I take time to really be grateful for the things that I'm doing. And when this podcast goes out, it will be the full moon. I think tomorrow or maybe the next day is the full moon. So that's the full moon. And I have started doing this thing that I totally stole from, it's an idea I totally stole from Her Speak, Molly Roberts. On YouTube, she has this wonderful video that I will totally share whenever we put this podcast up. I'll share it on our Facebook page. Of where she actually goes through this like gratitude ritual, and I have done this every full moon since I've watched this, and like my life has just been totally just amazingly different.
I can attest to this. Like, it's it's epic, and I've actually like recommended it to people, and they're like, "This, this right here, has made a difference," and I'm like, "Ah, it all comes together.
Right?
It's so
And it's
good."
it's so good. And like my life has just felt more magical, and I have felt a lot more like I can do all of these things. And I've also been doing some shadow work lately, just typical everyday shadow work. Okay, so that's what I've been witching lately. I've been doing some gratitude and some shadow work. I haven't been doing a whole bunch else. We did do Ostara yesterday, and that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a lot. But that's pretty much all I've been witching lately. So this weekend was the spring equinox, or for those of you listening in Australia, the autumn equinox. Although this episode is primarily targeted toward people in the northern hemisphere, I think, don't you? And the spring equinox is, as most of you probably know, the first day of spring. It's also one of the 2 days of the year where there are equal amounts of daylight and nighttime, as opposed to the solstices, where the days are either the shortest days or the longest days of the year. The spring equinox is also, not coincidentally, the first day of Aries, the sign of the ram. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac and is the cardinal fire sign ruled by Mars, the god of war. Aries is very much an independent sign and can sometimes be a bit selfish. Being the first sign of the zodiac, the number that it resonates with is 1. This means that Aries is often this means that Aries often thinks of themselves first and can forget to check in with the people around them. They are fiery by nature, and their cardinal aspect makes them prime candidates for get shit done. They are very like go, 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 do, do, do. Um, we can speak a little bit more to what cardinal means in astrology a little bit later if we need to. Um, when you're looking for a little bit of motivation, turn to Aries for help. Some famous Arians are Gloria Steinem, Mariah Carey, Christopher Walken, Hugh Hefner, Thomas Jefferson, Vincent van Gogh, Aretha Franklin, Diana Ross, Reba McEntire, and Adolf Hitler, although Adolf Hitler was actually on the Aries Taurus cusp, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Um, So today's topic is going to be about creativity, the spring equinox, and Aries energy, and using all of them sort of together and using this time to sort of get a lot of really good creative energy flowing and how to sort of tune into that and how to use it. So, a lot of times, whenever we think of creativity, we think about like painting or drawing or playing music or something that's really artsy. We don't often think about, like what's a good example of something that we don't really think about as being creative, but is creative.
Well, like anything, like even the ideas before the painting is creating, because you have to make that, you know. This is what I've been trying to think of, like other things that are creative that um, are not like what you think of when you think of creating things. But creating or create, it's just making anything.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really I got this book and it was the book that I kept in my bathroom, to just like look at whenever, people went to the bathroom or whatever. And it was basically like trying to redefine what creativity means to people. And I really enjoyed it because it was really eye-opening for me, because I think of creativity what I used to think of when I thought of creativity was like painting. And it always made me a little bit sad because I've sort of always pictured myself as like a creative person, but I've never been very good at painting, you know what I mean? And so like it was always this sort of like, well, maybe I'm not as creative as I think I am, but really I am a very, very creative person when it comes to redefining the word creativity in my head. And that's like creativity literally means like the use of, or let's see, creativity means the act of creating something. And so, really, like, think of all of the things that are like creating other things. So, like, childbirth would literally be creating something. So, maybe you could think of like sex as being creative. And I think that's very interesting to think about.
I do so many like creative things that is everything that I do, from cooking to making jewelry to writing things, anything, putting all these things in my lists, all the ideas that I come up with all the time. Even if they don't turn into stuff, I still created them.
I think also, like, think about reading a novel where in your mind you're creating the pictures that you see. I think reading is interesting. It's a very interesting kind of magic where like an author can literally just put images, symbols on a piece of paper and give it to someone else, and then that person creates a whole world of things in their head. That's a very interesting kind of magic. But we're not talking about that really today, so. And uh, I wanted to discuss a little bit like the process of creation a lot of times especially when it comes to like art forms and stuff like that, but I don't want to limit it to that. I think anytime you want to create anything you can think of it in these terms. So the creative process that I have written down here, I did some research, and a lot of different places were saying this, and I agree with it, I think. But anyway, it's like four eyes. It's inspiration, incubation, illumination, implementation. Right. So the inspiration is you're walking around and you run across, something, and it inspires you, or maybe you hear about some sort of, cultural issue that you want, a social issue, and you think there needs to be change. So you get inspired by something there, and that in and of itself is a kind of fire that you would find in like Aries energy. It's very like go forth and do, and like I said, get shit done. Aries is very, very fiery. It is it's a fire sign, and it's also a cardinal sign. And what cardinal means is that, okay, so if you break down the seasons, so there's four seasons. So you have spring, summer, fall, winter. Each of the first signs of that season is the cardinal sign of the season. There are three signs in each season. So you get four seasons, three signs in a season, you get 12 signs, right?
Do the other ones have names?
Yeah. The middle one is the fixed sign.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one, the third one, is the mutable sign. And the reason that they're given those specific names is because they have certain energies associated with them. So cardinal energy is start up energy. It's very like get up and go.
Mhm.
It's let's change some things. Let's do some things. Let's, rearrange the house. Let's, build a building. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's about ideas, and it's about
Mhm.
putting things into motion, basically pushing a rock down a hill. You know,
Yep.
fixed energy is really like I'm gonna stay here and do my thing. I'm just gonna sit here and be, you know, not change a whole lot.
Mhm.
It's like I like where I'm at. I'm not gonna change. And then mutable energy is, it's similar to um, cardinal energy in that it's about change, but it's like it's not about startup change. It's almost a sort of like running away kind of change. It's like I'm so tired of this thing over here
Mhm.
that I have to move. Whereas it's different from cardinal energy because it's like, you know, cardinal energy is all about starting something, and mutable energy is sort of about ending something and changing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you look at the course of the seasons, you have your cardinal month is what I'm going to call it, which that would be like Aries, or like one of the three other signs that I can't think of off the top of my head. You get what I'm saying though. So
Mhm.
uh, they're all about, the changing from winter to spring, or the changing of spring to summer, or the changing of, autumn to
Mhm.
winter, or whatever. And then the fixed signs, like for example, Aquarius is a fixed sign. It's in the very middle of winter, um, around, Capricorn, or with Capricorn and Pisces around it. So it's like it does there's not a lot of change there. There's not the change isn't happening. Um and mutable, I believe, let's say Gemini, I believe is a mutable sign, where it's like just getting out of spring and into summer, and it's all about change. Mutable signs are about change, and it really comes from the changing of one season to
Mhm.
another. So I like to think about this in those terms. Think about cardinal energy as like fiery, go, 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 do energy, moving into a new home.
Mhm. The one that you would, if you want something done, you want to harness this energy. This is when you want to work.
Yes. And so inspiration is, that's where you're grabbing little bits of cardinal energy, and you're using them in your little, creative mind, and you're like, how am I gonna, do this? I'm gonna say piece of art, but that's not really, I don't want to limit us by saying
Mhm.
art, but I'm gonna say art anyway. um but anyway, so we take our little bits of cardinal energy that we find around us, that we're like, oh, I need this for inspiration, and this and this and this, and you're grabbing, all these different things. Like for example, I had a project that I had to do for class, and I was trying to sort of look around and get some ideas for what I was going to do. And um, I was listening to a podcast to get ideas for it, because it was an audio
Mhm.
project, right? So I was trying to listen to other audio things and see what they did, and that sort of thing. So I found one, and I was like, "Oh, I love this. I love that they did this, this, and this." And so I used those bits of things as my cardinal energy. And then I also used other things too, like I went into meditation,
Mhm.
and I used, inspiration from that as well. So I combined those things and I let them sit. And that's where we move on to incubation, which is letting the inspiration rest.
Mhm.
So you have your inspiration, and now you just kind of have to let it sink in and let it sort of meld itself together, and this is really all about patience. Like if you rush this incubation period, you're going to come out with some like really, you're not going to be as pleased with the
Hmm.
results. You're not going to be, it's going to feel off, and people aren't going to enjoy it as much. You're not going to enjoy it as much. And it's just going to be sort of a chore to work on. And that's never fun. Yeah.
Two things. First, I was messing with my tarot the other day, and I was pulling cards and saying, what is my the next best step? What do I need to be focusing on right now? That would be best to focus on right now to move me forward. And both cards I pulled were just let it chill. Stop rushing it. I'm like, okay, okay, we're just gonna let it. We're just gonna hang out with it for a little while, for right now. The second thing is that when I found a couple resources on the creative process that have this structure, and I was reading about them. And as I was reading through them, especially in the incubation part, I thought the whole thing sounded like magic.
Hmm.
Like it's just a spell. It is all it is.
Yeah, sure, sure, sure.
Like the preparation and inspiration is where you kind of you figure out what you want to do, kind of, and then you gather up the things that kind of go with it. The things that are going to power that uh, intention, and then you go to the incubation, and that's where you do, like, you either go through meditation. Because when I was reading the incubation part earlier, I said, oh, that makes a lot of sense to me, because when I'm like, I have a tiny inkling, a teeny tiny inkling, and there's nothing really attached to it, I'll go and meditate on it to grow it, you know. And I think that's how I incubate them a lot of the time. Because that's when everything kind of comes together all of a sudden. It all, like, the light switches on, and then all the things start falling into place. And it moves into, like, the illumination part. And that's when I get up
Yes.
and I go inside and I write it all down.
Well, actually, I don't know if you've read On Writing by Stephen King. It's his memoir.
I should.
It's so good too. I
I'm
love
gonna,
it.
I'm
It's
gonna,
great.
gosh dang it.
You should. I own it. You can totally borrow it next time I see you. Um,
Mail it to me.
but he says, and I might be quoting this wrong, I'm not actually quoting anything, but I might be remembering the specifics of this wrong. But how I
Uh
interpreted it
huh.
was that writing a story, inspiration for writing a story can like is just a tiny little thing, that you feel
Mm hmm.
inside of you, and it's like it's almost
The
like, yeah,
spark.
it's almost like walking by, you're walking down the road and you see something sticking up out of the ground, and you're like, "Oh, what is that?" And so you kind of start like digging at it. And you start like really digging this thing up, and as you're writing and writing and writing, and as you're, thinking of how you're working through this, story idea or any other kind of idea that you have. It's not limited with a story,
Mm hmm.
but you start out with this teeny tiny little, just a little jabbing feeling at you, and then you sort of explore that, and it grows and it grows and it grows. And eventually what you've dug up is this beautiful house, that's, yeah, I and I'm like, yes, that resonated with me so much. It
Uh
really
huh.
did. So the next step after we sort of let things sort of culminate in our mind
Mm
with
hmm.
the incubation stage is the illumination stage, and that's sort of where we're actually bringing the physical into
Mm
the
hmm.
world. So we're taking this sort of mental idea that we have, and we're sort of applying it to uh, like
Some sort
reality,
of
right? So
medium. And the medium doesn't have to
yeah,
be a
so if we
canvas
have,
or like an MP3 or whatever, you know.
yeah. But, like, for example, if we're talking about, like,
Mm-hmm.
painting, let's just talk about painting. If we're talking about painting, then you have your inspiration, you get your spark, you have your incubation where you sort of sit on it for a little while, and then your illumination is, well, how exactly am I going to start implementing these thoughts into reality? It's sort of the stage right before you actually come up with a product,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then your product would
Like the
be,
prototyping stage.
yeah, you start kind of messing around with ideas, altering them, tweaking
Mm-hmm.
them. You do something, you paint a line here, and then you're like, no, 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 I don't
The
like.
experimentation stage almost.
Sort of, yeah. And so you're sort of playing around with it, and you're sort of bringing light to these ideas that are just in your head right now. So it's
Mm-hmm.
it's all about getting something out into the physical world is really what
Mm-hmm.
what the creative process is about. It starts out in your head and then it comes out into reality.
Much as
So
magic.
exactly, and I think that this is really interesting. So then we move on to implementation, and that is where you're actually literally physically making the thing and you have a product. That is where the end result comes, and you can tweak it, you can change it, but you have your
Mm-hmm.
your product. The you know. So so an interesting thought that I had while I was researching,
Yeah.
the creative process, if you look at these four different things, they sort of go along with the elements, and the four elements in Western cultures, magical use that we typically use, and inspiration, which is that's a thought, that
Mm-hmm.
is a thought bubble. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it goes along with air, which is like knowledge and thought and thinking and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Incubation, which is like waiting, that's sort of letting things settle, which is very like earthy, right? Illumination would be like coming up with your ideas, thinking and changing your mind about things. Like you start out and you're like, I want to do things this way. No, 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 let me scrap that. I want to do things this way instead. I think that's very watery
Mm-hmm.
because you're constantly moving and changing and you're just playing around with different thoughts and concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And then the actual implementation is where you're putting something out into the world. You're taking things from a you go from your little thought bubble and it goes out through your hand, and suddenly it's in reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very fiery, because I don't know if you guys have ever been on these like creative highs, but there you just have a constant push to like get something out, get a product created. You have a lot of fire behind it. It's very like go go go. I have to do this thing. And so anyway, I just think that's really interesting, and you can use that in your magical practice too. Um, where you can think about, I want to incorporate air into this spell. And so you think about, well, I have to have a thought first, and then I have to let it sit. So I'm going to work with incubation and earth, you know what I mean? And you can just do all these different things and do it step by step, or you can go out of order, or you can play around with it. It doesn't really matter. But I do think it's really interesting, though, to think about
Mm-hmm.
things in those terms. Um, but, this show is not about all of the rest of the elements. It's about Aries and fire energy, and really just getting that like creative push out. But we can talk about that in a different show, really using all of these different signs and in the creative process, and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I want to just stick to Aries in this show. Is there anything that you have to say about creating and like Aries and stuff like that? What does Aries mean to you?
So I don't know a lot about Aries. I know that um I feel a lot of like determination, I think is the word.
Yeah, I mean
Because I
that's
just
really
imagine
that's
this
really what it's
like,
all about, right?
a ram
Uh-huh.
just like
Pushing through
just
things,
pushing
right?
on through, just you know. And
Right.
that's so like that's just, you know, that's my impression of Aries. It's like sticking with it and getting it done and just like pushing through the bullshit and like coming out the other side with a thing, you know.
Yes. Yes. I think your idea of Aries energy is very apt for what Aries is and what it means. So let's think of Aries as an archetype.
Mhm.
So this is not, I don't want to think of this as just something that Aries people can use. Like if you have Aries in your zodiac, in your horoscope, in your zodiac, then that's great. Use it in this way. But I want people who, like, I don't have any Aries anywhere. I don't think I might have it as one of my planets or something. But I don't want to limit the views of this idea of using Aries energy. Use Aries as an archetype instead of like, I'm not just limiting this to Aries people who are
Yeah.
born in April, or anything like that, or people who have an Aries moon or anything
Yeah.
like that. I want to think of Aries as an archetype that you can tune into whenever you want to. Use this
Mhm.
fiery cardinal energy and get shit done with it,
Mhm.
Do think of, all of the different, sort of creative things that you can do. I mean, there are a lot of different ways of being creative and different ways that you can use the zodiac in that sort of creativity. But this sign is really like the epitome of start some shit, like
Mhm.
get an idea out there, get it rolling, and it's not necessarily the sign that you want to use to get something completely finished and out there, but it is definitely the startup of something. And so I really just want to think of like some ideas. I just want to share some ideas of ways of getting in touch with your Aries cardinal fire energy.
Mhm.
So, can you think of some ways off the top of your head that people can sort of get in touch with this archetype?
Hmm. Mix up some really awesome incense.
You might meditate, or you might include crystals into your life that sort of resonate with those certain different archetypes or whatever. You might put pictures up of things that remind you of certain other things.
Mhm.
So, like, say,
You could set up a small altar to Aries.
to sort of encourage your Aries energy. Yeah, you could. You could make like a sort of vision board that just has stuff that has to do with like Aries creativity. So something that I just thought of
Uh huh.
is Aries is all about like independence and like being it's not even necessarily all about
Mhm.
independence as much as it's just about being a single person, being a single entity,
Mhm.
right? You don't need other people, you don't have other people in your life. And really, if you think about it, the creative process, that singularity is so important because if you, like, you have to be, I don't know if you've read A Room of One's Own, which is a book, or it's not even a book, it's like a tiny little, 70-page like essay
Mhm.
written by Virginia Woolf, and it's called A Room of One's Own,
Mhm.
and it's basically about how it was sort of an encouragement for women, because at the time it was women were sort of looked down on as writers, but it was sort of like women need. I think she said it was like a lot of money and a room of one's own.
Mhm.
Like that's what women need to become good writers or something. And it's really the what I took away from the essay was
you have to be able to close yourself off from other people in order to get things created, to get things done. And that's really hard whenever you have
Mm-hmm.
a family and whenever you have, maybe a roommate or you have a partner or whatever. It's really difficult to be able to just cut off all of those ties for a brief amount of time and then create your thing and then go back um, to the world you were previously living in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's especially, I mean, it might not be difficult for you to do that, maybe, I don't know, but your partner might not understand, or they might be like, well, you never spend any time with me
Mm-hmm.
anymore, or whatever. So it's really, a lot of it is about balance. And I think a lot of times, whenever people get into astrology, they're like, oh, I'm an Aquarius, which means that I need to do all of these Aquarius things and be my most Aquarian self and, all this different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I personally think my take on it is that we need to sort of incorporate all of the archetypes of the zodiac and use them in our lives in balance all with one another,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can, yes, we can be very, you know, singular people in the Aries sense, but we can also be very like dual people in the Libra sense, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we can do that at the same time. We can be selfish, but we can also be humanitarian, we can be uh,
Yeah.
quiet and we can also be talkative.
That just reminds me of like duality. We are contradictory. That's why we are human. Humans are way more complicated than that. Emotions are situational. We're not always bad people. We just do bad things sometimes.
There you go.
One thing I wanted to say earlier when I was talking about the creative process, the four stages of the creative process, um, as like a ritual or spell work or magic
Oh
or
yeah,
whatever, and
magic. Yeah.
actually like looking at it like it's a ritual. So like you had the inspiration part, and I said that's where you get this inkling for like maybe an intention that you want to do, and so you surround yourself with stuff, herbs and rocks and imagery that associate with that intention.
Actually, before we move on, or before we get really into that, I just want to say
Mm-hmm.
that Joanna DeVoe
Mm-hmm.
has a sort of a similar thought on this. I don't know that she uses it specifically like with magic work,
Mm-hmm.
and we're sort of using it as like this creative process, which could be seen as the exact same thing.
Uh-huh.
Whatever. Um, so she breaks it down into four stages: earth, air, fire, water.
Uh-huh.
But but she does it in a little bit, number one, a little bit different order, and it's a little bit. I think it really differs on the earth part. So
Mm-hmm.
you have your inspiration, which is your thought, and then you have uh, water, which is to start thinking about, how can I actually do these things? Sort of talking yourself into like this thing is a possibility. And then fire would be the actual act of putting it into motion, and then earth would be leaving it alone. And I don't know if you've come across that yet listening to her, but it just sort of reminded me of what we came up with this whole creative process thing, and I think it's really neat. Um,
That's kind of similar to what I thought about this as a magical process. Kind of.
mhm. Yeah.
You might get that. Okay.
I just wanted to
Um
say that before you said too much
yeah.
about it.
So like the preparation is the, getting ready for the whatever ritual
The
or
inspiration, you
yeah.
mean?
Yes. The inspiration is the, gathering the things and the words and stuff and getting it ready. And then the 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 incubation part would be like the meditation
or the burning or whatever it is, the act where you know, you kind of ball it all up and you say all the words and you've lit everything and you're getting ready to mail it to the universe, to release it or whatever, to send it out. And then the illumination was the actual like beam or whatever. I don't know what to call it, like the actual sending of the releasing of it to the universe. And then the implementation, I thought when I was reading these four stages, I think they were called things differently, but they're basically the same things. I think mine was called verification stage.
Yeah.
But it made me think that's like when you talk about the law of attraction, and you've done the spell work, you've meditated on it, and you've sent it out into the universe, but now you have to meet the universe halfway.
Yeah. So, what would you credit that to? Like fire?
Yeah, yeah, because that's the actual act of going and doing things to create a path
Yeah.
for your magic to work.
Yeah.
You know, and that was what I thought when I read it.
Okay. So, we started out with this whole, like, we wanted to bring together the whole spring equinox and Aries energy and creative process.
Hmm.
But really, we're sort of touching a little bit on magical practice as a whole. And I think that this is a very interesting thing because to me, creativity is magic. I think it's all sort of the same thing, it's all wrapped up together.
Hmm. Well, it's that the act of having a thought and then manifesting it into reality.
Mhm.
That's all magic is, at least to me. You know,
Right.
taking some kind of desire, whether that is to paint something or whatever, or to find love or whatever it is that you're wanting to do,
Uh-huh.
and making it real. So,
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that in and of itself is sort of the essence of magic. Taking an idea and putting it into motion, into reality,
mhm,
and that sort of thing. And I every time I say this, I do this like little motion where I like start with my hands up at my head,
mhm.
and then I like go out like I don't know if you can even picture what I'm talking about, but like I go out with my hands. Like, I does that make any sense at all?
You're like pushing it out, like.
Yeah, sort of. Like that is sort of the motion that I keep making every time I talk about this, whole it starts out in in your head and then you push it out into reality. And it's anyway, and that really sort of touches on the essence of what magic is sort of influencing things with, your thoughts and your feelings about the
Mhm,
world. You have an idea to create something, anything, and you do it, and that following through with it is really the magical part of it, right? Um and I think a lot of people like to look at it in sort of more mystical terms, like, no, magic doesn't really, it's its own entity. It's not me acting upon something. They're two separate things. But I mean sure, that's one way of looking at it. But my personal way of looking at it is magic is really the art of saying I want this thing to be done and then making sure that that thing gets done.
changing self so that you can change the world.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Let's just sit on that for a second. I like that. Changing self.
What else? What else? There's a lot of things to see in springtime. There's a lot of
Ooh.
things happening in spring. There's a lot of changes happening in spring. You know, there's animals are coming back out. You got flowers again. Plants are growing. It's green. It rains. It's like it feels nice. All of these things. And so I think that just going out and being in this, you know, because spring is still new right now, could maybe give some inspiration. You know, just go out and be in spring for a little while it's still like shiny and new. And anyways, but that's I think that's what I wanted to add is that there's tons of opportunity to observe things you haven't seen in a couple months, you know, since last year.
Well, yeah, there is that. I think it's really important to like take some time and go hang out with your flowers that have just bloomed, your daffodils and your tulips, you know, and all of your little springtime flowers. And you know, just think about them once they were just a seed, you know, and now that
Hmm.
things have sort of followed through, now they're a beautiful flower. And all of your things can become that too.
That was
Tying all
beautiful.
things together. Thank you. So,
They everything is working together in it's like this bubble of reality that we live in is just like a giant super mega machine, and it's all working together. Like everything eventually kind of, you're like, oh, that one connects to that one, which connects to that one, which connects to that one, and that's how they all turn. That's how I kind of see things.
me too. And that's how I see the zodiac. That's how I see the wheel of the year. That's how I see magic. That's how I see everything.
Hmm. And because they all link up, and because everything is so interconnected and woven together, and it makes it that much more potent because it's everywhere. But anyways, that's all.
Well, so yeah. You guys like enjoy your springtime, enjoy your Aries energy, get out there and create some stuff. So that is the end of our conversation on Aries and creative energy and the spring equinox. We hope that you go out and do some creating. We hope this podcast was a little inspirational for you. Bye.
Bye.
This episode used music from bensound.com.